50 low.
On the night that national hero Willie Mays has passed, Steven Rubio and I are here to talk about a different sport and another installment of What They Said. We are looking at tennis movies tonight, and it won't be hard to guess why. We have had a very prominent tennis movie in theaters the last 2 months. I don't think I told you I had to drive to Burlington to re-see it because it's basically left theaters. It's in that
Mhm.
gray zone right now between hitting whatever Crave or Prime or Netflix and out of theaters, but I was able to find a theater about 9 minutes away that was playing it. So we're going to talk about four tennis movies tonight. One that is not well regarded at all, but it's free on Facebook. And I think I remember it because it was probably playing when I was an usher at the Georgetown Theater in 1979. A film
Okay, so you saw it for free.
I think so. There's no other reason I would remember it. A film called Players from 1979 with Ali McGraw, Dean Paul Martin, who has an interesting story that we'll talk about, and directed by Anthony Harvey. And we're also going to talk about two that came out in 2017, although one of them I found wasn't released till 2018. Battle of the Sexes, I should say Billie Jean King Bobby Riggs film. It seems silly to list Bobby Riggs first. Um, Directed by Valerie Ferris and Jonathan Dayton, the people that brought you Little Miss Sunshine. Um, and then a few months made in 2017, but it took a few months to get released. Borg versus McEnroe, directed by Giannis Metz Peterson. And then the film that brought us to the other three this year's Challengers, directed by Luca Guadagnino, who I don't know anything about his previous
Close
films.
enough.
Yeah, the people who, I'm sure I mangled this last name, the people who were posting about this film on the message board, he seems to be a director who's made at least one of the films that's known. So how about we take them in chronological order? Stephen, is that okay?
Meaning we start with players?
No, yeah, starting with players, or would you
Oh
rather
God.
as a
Okay,
foot?
are we done yet?
Yeah, I thought we could dispense with players pretty quickly.
Man,
I have a few things
I'll,
to say.
I'll go ahead.
Um, and we're probably going to have to, because before we started recording, Steve and I spent the first 5 minutes talking about Willie Mays, so we'll probably have to go to the second soon. Anyway, so I keep looking off at my notes, and I'll tell you, Stephen, even seeing each of these, seeing players once and all the others twice, I just, at my age, which is 62, I just cannot hold four films in my mind at once. So even tonight, even though I've seen all the three of the four twice, I still had to really think about what I wanted to say. So the first thing I'll say about players is, and I know Stephen pointed out, we watched it both off YouTube. You watch it for free on YouTube, and you kept saying aspect ratio. And I kept thinking it was going to be distorted, like they would be all too
Oh,
skinny or
no,
too wide.
no.
It's that they just lop off the
Yeah,
edges.
they just lopped
Do
it
with,
off.
yeah, with widescreen films, which is, I don't think they call that, I don't think that's aspect ratio. There's another name for it. They have a special name for it, whatever they do. Anyway, it didn't bother me. And because it's, such a marginal film, I mean, what did we miss? We missed Dean Paul Martin going a little more left of the screen to get a shot. I want to say that it's a bad film, but it wasn't bad in the way that I expected. It's not campy bad. It's bad because
No.
it's slow and meandering. You know, it's from a decade where they still tried to kind of put some thought into films. It's the very tail end of the 70s, but it's not quite a debacle. It's not a fondly remembered film. There's certainly lots we'll want to pick apart. I thought the tennis half of the film actually wasn't too bad, somewhat convincing, partly because Dean Martin's son, read up on him, and also once in Dino, Desi, and Billy, who had a couple of minor hits in the 70s. That's with what? Who else? What were the other famous sons in that band?
Desi was Desi Arnaz
Dennis
Jr.
Arnaz Jr., of course, and
And
Billy.
Billy was might have been Jack Nitschke's kid, I forget, but he
Okay.
was the least famous of the three.
Yeah. So, I mean, he's had quite a life. He was married to Olivia Hussey of Romeo and Juliet, right?
Hmm.
And Dorothy Hamill, he was married to Dorothy Hamill, unbelievable. Anyway, he was also a real tennis player who played at
Yes.
Wimbledon. I don't know how far he advanced. So, he was very credible not as an actor, he was very credible as a tennis player. Pancho Gonzalez, I thought was good as the coach. And you had all these, really neat cameos. So we're going to talk about Borg versus McEnroe. You get the actual John McEnroe when he's
Yeah, yeah.
kind of quiet and modest, still young. Jimmy Connors is in it. And two guys I got mixed up. Guillermo, how do you say it? Vilas? Guillermo Vilas and
Yes,
Vitas
he's the one he
Gerolaitis.
plays in the final match.
Yeah, and I would always get him mixed up with Vitas Gerolaitis. And Ilya Nastasi used to get in the film. He had nasty Natashi. That half wasn't bad. The half that I just what is it? Why do they have Ellie McGraw wandering around? And I felt it the first time I started to watch it, I drifted off. So when I resumed it a day or two later, 15 minutes into it, I had no idea why Ellie McGraw was even there, how we met her. Like what does she bring to the film? What is that whole half of the film about? I'm going to stop there and
Right.
let you break it.
Okay, well, I would ask that about pretty much any movie she was in, but that's me. Um, I think I commented at the time that uh, the least you could say was that, well, she was up to the level acting as Dean Paul Martin, which is he wasn't an actor either. But I have to agree with you. It's important that he was a real tennis player
Yeah,
because of all the movies that we've watched for this episode. Uh, there's various finagling going on. The actors do their best to train. The challengers, they use a lot of CGI, but it's kind of spotless. You can't tell. But yeah, he knew what he was doing. Vilas was obviously a real player. So the tennis scenes had less fiddling than they did with the non-tennis playing guys, and that matters. But the movie sucked so bad it didn't matter that much because it was horrible. Ally McGraw's horrible. Dean Paul Martin is a good tennis player. Now, I found this. Maybe you've seen this one. There was somebody who liked this movie.
oh no,
Quentin
I didn't.
Tarantino. Have you heard of this?
Who?
Quentin Tarantino liked players.
Oh wow, I didn't know that. Okay,
Okay,
that's great.
so I'm looking at his review. Okay, and I'm going to be selective here, but he says, let me see, as a Hollywood tennis sports movie, it's pretty good. Dean Paul Martin in his only feature film lead is pretty good as the tennis bum turned tennis star. His tennis is terrific. And while I didn't necessarily need to see him star in anything else, as a tennis pro, he's pretty fucking convincing. The film's best moments are Dean Paul Martin training with his coach, real life tennis giant Pablo Gonzalez.
I said Pancho.
Well, as I said after I read
Sorry,
that,
I'm
that's
getting
what we
him
call
mixed up.
damning with faint praise. Yeah, he was.
Jeez, I feel
He was
terrible.
a pretty good at tennis, and I like the scenes where he played with Pancho Gonzalez. And I didn't really want to run out and watch any more Dean Paul Martin movies. And yeah, that's not much of a positive review. But on the other hand, nobody else said anything nice about it. So Quentin gets credit for being the one person out there who ever said anything nice about that stupid movie.
Now I know Kale used to be merciless on Ally McGraw and Candice Bergen. I'm going to stick up for her a little bit. Obviously, she is not much of an actress. She's a model. She is very beautiful. She's very beautiful in this, although she has kind of an icy beauty, I guess. I think she's actually okay in Goodbye Columbus and Love Story. She doesn't have to do much. I mean, Kale used to be very specific about criticism. She used to talk about her nostrils. Um, I think she tries. And,
I'll say that.
you know, it sounds like it sounds like she got kind of mistreated by Robert Evans and Steve McQueen. I don't know. Anyway, I don't dislike her as much as you do. What is Steve Gutenberg? I know we don't want to spend too much time on this, but what the hell is Steve Gutenberg doing in this film? It's
You
like
know,
bizarre. He pops in every so often to fetch balls and to place bets. I
They got to have somebody in there, to cast the movie.
couldn't figure that out.
I mean, like
So
you mentioned, it was a legitimate movie.
yeah,
Anthony Harvey, legitimate director.
Anthony Harvey. I
You know
meant
what I mean?
mostly an
So I
actor.
mean, it was
Is he not mostly famous for acting, Anthony Harvey? I can picture him.
Anthony Harvey. He directed Lion and Winter, I think.
Okay, but he was
So
also
he
an
was
actor.
known
Yeah.
for that kind of stuff.
Okay. Well, we won't dwell on it, but I think it was a film that got a certain amount of um, advanced hype when it came out in '79. It was supposed to be a
Mhm.
big film. It sank without a trace, like just nothing. So
It
let's
helped in
get
one sense. It made a good contrast. The other three movies that we're going to talk about, I didn't think any of them were great, but I liked them all. And
okay. Well,
Players is a good way to say this is what a bad movie looks like, and these other three are pretty good, you
yeah.
know.
Okay. I
So
like
in that
one.
sense, it helps.
Yeah, is to set up the other three. I actually like one of the three a lot, and taking them chronologically, we're going to talk about the one that I do like a lot next.
Okay.
I made the dismissive remark about Little Miss Sunshine, of which I remember absolutely nothing. I think Battle of Sexes, I liked it the first time, and I think I liked it even more the second time. Um,
Yeah.
I think it, and the things I'm going to say that I like about it will be a stark contrast to Borg versus McEnroe, which I really don't like that much. I thought it has some humor in it. It's got spark. It's got I think a good feel for the period. Um, and it uses CGI and sort of computer trickery quite well when Cosell interviews Emma Stone as Billie
Yes.
Jean King.
The
Better than
blending between the real and the filming, they did okay with that.
Yeah, I thought did fine. It was better than Forrest Gump. I thought Emma Stone and I just general. I think the film makes its points about feminism and the times and how big a deal this match really was. I mean, I read a book on sports in the '70s, and in some ways, it was the key thing in the entire decade in this book, which was very comprehensive about the whole decade. But it wasn't like whatever. It wasn't the 1975 World Series, or it wasn't something in the Olympics. It was the King Riggs match and Billie Jean King in general. I thought Emma
It
Stone
was
was good.
something that non-sports fans knew about because it was such a
Exactly. Yeah.
giant deal. It was on TV. We all got to watch it. So
Yeah.
it was bigger than sports.
Yeah. And I was watching. I was young, 73 or 74.
Somewhere in there, yeah.
Okay, so I would have been like 12 or 13, but I was definitely watching. And I think I probably even watched the Margaret Court match. I thought Emma Stone was good. She captured, a lot of it is about Billie Jean King's kind of tentativeness about acknowledging her sexuality. I thought she captured that well. Um, like she wasn't completely closeted. She was sort of poking her foot out, and it was
Mhm.
good. I thought she did a good job. She disappeared for me. I wasn't thinking I was watching Emma Stone. To me, in a lot of ways, Steve Carell is the key to the film because I think you have to kind of find him engaging for the film to work. If he just does a cartoonish, and he had that part of Bobby Riggs, but he also, I think, gave a nuanced performance. I don't think you come away really disliking Bobby Riggs. I think that in a way, almost the worst aspects of Bobby Riggs, the really piggish stuff. I almost thought, and this might not even be accurate, I thought he was almost doing it with a wink, like, this is a performance. I want to hype this match. When he's actually standing beside Billie Jean King, he's very gracious, after the match. When he's doing the publicity stuff, yeah, he's kind of terrible, the stuff he says, but it really did seem to me like it was a show. I don't know the real Bobby Riggs. Maybe Steve Carell wanted to, dial it back a bit, but I thought Steve Carell was great. The real villain of the film is not Bobby Riggs. It's the other guy. It's, I got his name here. The guy that, what's his name? The actor that Marcus likes. Anyway, Jack
Oh, was
Kramer.
this President for an Independence Day?
Yeah, who played Jack Kramer? Um,
Yeah.
Bill Pullman, right?
Bill, Bill, yeah.
He's the real villain of the film. It's not Bobby
Yeah.
Riggs, I think. And anyway, to me, Riggs and I thought Billie Jean King's husband was very good too. And in turn,
Yes.
very pragmatic. So I liked all the performances. And I thought I got other stuff to say. You break in now, and I'll go to my other stuff.
Okay. First of all, so much of what you said I agree with. Steve Carell, yeah, he's only cartoonist to the extent that Bobby Riggs was.
Right.
So
It's got a
that
cap,
he pulls that off, and he is kind of charming. In real life, the two of them became friends afterwards.
which I
And Billie Jean understood what was going on too. She also knew that she's going to kick his ass, but they became friends as far as that goes. And I agree that Emma Stone was fine. Uh, the tennis scenes were as good as they could have been, all things considered. And I didn't have anything bad to say about it, and especially since I really didn't like Little Miss Sunshine.
yeah.
So I was able to say, well, at least they made one good movie because I really hated that one. So all those ways I was positive. The one question I had, and this is a common thread for me in all the movies, in a way, is why do we need this movie? There is a documentary. Maybe I haven't seen it. Maybe it stinks, but there's a documentary about this. Um, and I thought, well, in 2017, it seemed like a big deal at the time. Maybe nowadays people need to have the history lesson. Maybe it's not something that anybody remembers or not remembers, but just hadn't heard of. And in that sense, it serves a good purpose. And it's certainly a solid movie. But when it was over, I thought, okay, saw the movie, good actors, and was it necessary? I didn't know if it was. I didn't mind watching it. I hesitate to be negative, but I don't know that it was any better than a documentary would have been.
I would like to see the documentary. To underscore your point, though, there's also I found out a second film called dramatization called When Billy Beat Bobby. You know about that? 2001, Holly Hunter plays Billie Jean King, and Ron
Uh,
Silver plays Bobby Riggs. I think it was a
that
made
makes
for,
sense.
yeah, it might have been probably was a made for TV movie.
I can see that.
So, for you to say, is it necessary? That kind of, you could even throw that one in too. Yeah, I don't know, is it necessary? I always prefer a good documentary, but I actually think they pull off really well. I'm going to mention the music. The other films really don't have the two more recent films, the other two, although I shouldn't say that. Challengers does have a soundtrack that we'll talk about. Anyway, Crimson and Clover, when Billie Jean first meets, what is the hairdresser? Marilyn, right? The hairdresser, who is not the woman she ended up marrying. It was a different woman. Her life partner was a different woman. It
Yes,
wasn't.
that was apparently that was an ugly ending to that
Oh,
one.
I didn't know that. So Marilyn was not a composite, was an actual real life character, right?
I'm pretty sure she was. Yeah.
Okay, that was
Don't
good.
don't quote me, you
Okay.
YouTube watchers.
They had George Harrison's What Is Life? And of course, you can't have a film about tennis in the 70s without Elton John. So they had Rocket Man. And I thought they were all used well. I like, well, how I feel about that. I like when they take the time to at least try to capture something about the era. And music's a shortcut, but I thought they did it well. Um, that's about the match itself. The one thing I noticed about the tennis and the big climactic when they actually get playing is how they just, and I wonder, I'd like to go back. I wish I could watch the match. God, there must be some way you can actually watch a match. They certainly aren't hitting the ball hard. Like, I
No.
feel she could have decimated him. It was almost, I don't know if she was holding back or nervous or something. He's trying to do lob shots and all this stuff. And finally, when she gets going, yeah, it's not even close. I guess it just took her a while to find
Well,
it.
his lob shots and etc. was part of what helped him beat Margaret Court. So he
Exactly.
probably thought I can do that again. And she
Yeah.
had the advantage of having seen that and knew what he was going to do. She also, from the start, she knew that she was going to run him back and forth. You play tennis,
Yeah.
gets tiring after a while running back and forth, and she does that.
Yeah.
Now, as far as the scenes go, I'll make reference to this a couple times because I very much enjoyed a YouTube video where John McEnroe watches tennis movies. I don't know if you've seen this one.
No.
And in this case, when he watches this movie, he says, okay. And he says, it's a little slow, not meaning the tempo of the movie, but the play of the two stars in the match. And then he says, but yeah, maybe we played slower back then. We only had wooden rackets. Like that was the explanation for why Emma Stone and Steve Carell were kind of slow on the tennis, is because they had wooden rackets.
We'll talk more about McEnroe, but I'm sure in McEnroe's mind, the 1977 version of him would beat Federer and beat, all the great players today.
He makes
Besides,
mention in this video, he says, when he's going to talk about it, he says, now, I've had to listen for the last 20 years about how Serena could kick my ass. So I've lived with this.
besides Jack Kramer, the other villain of the film to me actually is kind of Margaret Court.
Yes.
Who
and that's legit. She was an anti-lesbian
really,
crusade.
okay, so that's pretty
Yes.
accurate.
So that's real.
She really resents Billie Jean. And I liked the actress who I knew her. I had to figure out where I knew her from. It was a TV series. The actress who played Rosie Cassell, she was very good.
You're right.
The one performance I was kind of iffy on was Sarah Silverman. Maybe comes on a little too strong.
I love Sarah Silverman, and I would agree.
Yeah,
I wonder why are you here? But
okay.
I'm a fan, so I let her get away with it. But
Yeah, no, I like her a lot. School of Rock, and like her a lot, and other things. Just maybe a bit much. Okay, let's move on to Borg versus McEnroe. Now, I really have mixed feelings about this. The thing I'll say is this film is so grim. I mean, this is a lively time with, lively people. I mean, I don't know, was Bjorn Borg so joyless? Does anyone smile in this film? I can't remember any, except for the Studio 54 scene had some light where Vitas Gerolaitis takes them all to Studio 54. And that's what the 70s is to me. This film didn't capture that. Shia LaBeouf, he's okay. Shia LaBeouf, am I saying that right? I always think of Sleepy LaBeouf.
Well, my wife yells at me a lot, so I've learned it's Shia LaBeouf.
Okay, Shia LaBeouf.
Because I've said it different every time I've said it, and she finally said, it's Shia LaBeouf. Okay, Shia LaBeouf. I got it.
He does all right. I swear, the guy that plays Borg, Severir Gunderson, and Stellan Skarsgård is his coach. They're off doing their own Bergman film. I mean, all they do is furrow their brows and grimace. Like they're doing the Stations of Jesus or something.
That's an angle I hadn't thought of, but you're right.
It's two films. The last thing I'll say before I hand it over, I wonder about the real life McEnroe. Oh, the press conferences were interesting too. Like the way say it again, Stephen. Shia
LaBeouf.
The way Shia LaBeouf plays him. When those press conferences actually happened, was he that agitated and confused that the press wanted to talk about his temper tantrums? Did he really expect that they would want to talk about shots that he made? Like, of course they're going to talk about him being, doing John McEnroe stuff. He seemed to, like, there's a real disconnect for me there. That he was caught off guard by that? Of course they're going to question you about that. Okay, so basically that was it for me, that it was such a slow, good-looking film, but very slow and completely joyless to me. That's my complaint about it. Go ahead.
Okay, this was of all of them, this was the most fun to watch McEnroe analyzing it. As he says when he starts, this is the one I'm supposed to like, I guess, because I'm in the title. And he says that they tried to make up a plot where they showed that Borg was temperamental when he was young. Yeah, I guess, yeah, he might have gotten upset once in his life. I don't really remember that though. his McEnroe's feelings about Borg were, no, that's who he was. He wasn't an explosive kind of guy. And they became friends afterwards, so that was fine. He complained, interesting, he thought the tennis was okay, the way it was edited and stuff. But at one point he pauses it when LaBeouf is going up for an overhand, and he says, look at his legs. They're so skinny. My legs aren't that skinny. What I didn't like was every time they show Borg, he looks like a god. He's all ripped and they show him doing pull-ups and he said, between the two of us, we weren't all that different physically. But in this movie, I'm just a little shrimp and Borg's God. So he didn't care for that part either. Anyway, going beyond him then. First off, it's only in my memory is I can't speak for him. McEnroe always struck me as very smart, and he and also canny. I don't think he did stuff that he didn't know what he was doing. So if he acted like that in the press conference, it was because he wanted to. I don't think he was puzzled by this, that, or the other thing. He just says what he thinks, and he's more thoughtful about it. So when he says something bizarro, then he's going to take it. But outside of that, I'm not a big fan of the actor, but I thought he was fine, and I thought that the way they use wigs and stuff, the two actors looked a lot like the tennis players. Although it drove me crazy watching it because that actor who played Borg, I kept thinking, man, he looks familiar. I never seen him, and he looks like Viggo Mortensen.
A little
And then
bit.
I read that he's been mistaken for Viggo Mortensen on occasion. I
Hmm.
said good because I couldn't remember. That's who that looks like. It looks like he's in Lord of the Rings. Uh, so anyway, the whether maybe it was true that Borg had to bring himself in to from his youth, but I thought that was mostly just there for make a story out of it, and that the problem was, I said at the time, in Scandinavia, I guess, Denmark, Sweden, the movie was called Borg, and I think that's accurate. I think that
It was more
it's
about
more
Borg.
about Borg. I
Yeah,
think that if Shai had been gotten a nomination, it would have been Best Supporting Actor. But
yeah.
it's not really equal like the title makes it sound. And the problem with that is Borg, great tennis player, not as interesting as a character. I'd watch a movie about McEnroe before I'd watch a movie about Borg. So I thought that the imbalance there didn't help the movie because the Borg stuff, it was like you're watching someone not explode.
Yeah.
And there's McEnroe and he explodes. Well, I'd rather watch the explosion, you know.
I should mention I had a real disadvantage rewatching it because I streamed it for free, some service, and everything was fine with one exception. All the Swedish, are they talking Swedish, right? Swedish
Mhm.
language. Anyway, all
Danish
the
or something.
Danish, all the talk between Borg and the coach, I had no subtitles. So I'm
Oh,
watching two people and I don't know what they're saying. So that was, the first time I saw it in theater when it came out, yeah, I remember there were subtitles for those scenes.
that matters.
I did go after I watched it. I went to Wikipedia and looked at the details of the great, the climactic match, and they had all that accurate. I can't
Yes.
say that I was watching it at the time. I mean, I followed a lot of different sports, but what was it, 80 or 81, maybe? I'd be very
Oh,
surprised if I watched it because I was at university and watching less
I
sport.
have I actually talked to him about it because I have a brother. He had a poster of Borg on his wall
Yeah.
forever. It seemed like he
I
loved
think it was,
Borg, and that was something that, especially when you played. Uh, I forget where I read this, but it said something like to be a better tennis player, imagine in your head that you're somebody who's good. I
hmm.
used to think I was Chris Evert. I mean, I wasn't good as Chris Evert, but I thought like what I thought she thought like. Well, my brother played like Borg and he liked Borg because Borg was machine like.
Machine-like
And
and based
McEnroe was, yeah, and McEnroe was a loudmouth and he didn't like him, you know. And so he didn't play like McEnroe, he played like Borg. And I asked him about if he'd seen the movie, and he said, I guess HBO ran a special about the match. Maybe they showed the whole thing or something, but he said he watched it, and he says, I'm still rooting for Borg. He said, so okay, and why not?
I think that was generally considered the greatest tennis match until Federer and uh, which of his two rivals played one 3 or 4 years ago that I think is considered now the greatest tennis match. I want to say the film I think probably gets across, and you hinted at that. They're contrasting styles of play. Borg was a machine. I don't know if he invented the baseline slugging game, but he was one of the first. McEnroe was more the traditional thing then was to rush and volley, right? Rush and volley, rush the net volley. And I got to double back for a second when you mentioned Chris Everett. I loved in Battle of Sexes where they had the actual footage of people making predictions, and Chris Everett said she thought Bobby Riggs was going to win.
Yeah.
Pretty much everybody did, except Rosie Greer, who starts off very heroic, but then he says something, something that doesn't date so well about the way Billie Jean looks, like, oh, I just wish she'd let her hair down or something like that.
Uh-huh.
The people that were predicting that Riggs was going to win. It was amazing.
It's funny too that you mentioned about the what the play was like, baseline, etc.
Yeah,
I paid a lot more attention to women's tennis in those days. The women's tour came around here every year, so we would go every year. And so I saw Chrissy and Martina play, and they had those contrasting styles. Chris Everett played the baseline. That's how she played. Martina rushed the net. So it was
yeah.
great to watch them. I always preferred the serve and volley. But having said that, the contrast was always best. And when the men's game got to the point where those guys who could serve 1,000 miles an hour, ace, 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 and there's ace, I didn't see that was interesting.
Yeah.
But so I like the contrast. Now, in these days, you get that a lot of the women have that same powerful serve, and you get a lot of that same thing. But
Does anybody put serve and
it's one of the
volley?
reasons I enjoyed Martina was because she would rush the net.
Yeah, I don't watch enough tennis. I should watch more. But Alcaraz, the new sensation, is he serving volley? Nobody seems to serve volley anymore, but I thought he did it more than most. Our fourth tennis movie tonight, Challengers, directed by Luca Guadagnino. I'm not sure what country he's from, and it has gotten a lot of attention. Summer months, movies, the scheduling of them, certain films are highly anticipated. I don't know if this was one of them, but when it did come out, it was reviewed everywhere and discussed, and even probably somewhat controversial. And I've seen it twice now. I have kind of mixed feelings, Stephen. Some things I thought were pretty good, and I have an issue with other things. What I'll mention is I'll start off with the same basic complaint, a little less so, but the same complaint that I raised about Borg versus McEnroe is that a lot of the movie, especially Zendaya, and I know you're a fan because of Euphoria, she is very grim. I know she started off in one of those Nickelodeon or Disney series because I remember when I was teaching, I had this thing where I try to contrast old sitcoms with new ones, and I think we may have watched an episode or two of her show, and she clearly had kind of a touch for light comedy. And a film like this, or the other one we discussed from when COVID started, I can't even remember what it was called, the black and white Netflix film. She never really gets to use that. And I guess and I understand the impulse she wants to, if you come from that background, you want to be taken seriously as an actress. I just wish that they would allow her to lighten up a bit more. I'm going to say, I don't know if you said this about Players or the other film, but does this film have an actual interest in tennis outside of Zendaya's description of the game as a conversation? She has that early soliloquy. Does this film, is it at all interested in tennis, or does it just hang this story on tennis? I don't know. Second time I watched it, one of the more interesting things about the film is probably the shifting timeline that they use. And I was better able to follow that. You're kind of going back and forth and about 3 or 4 different points in time, which is, an interesting way to tell the story. I'll say a couple more things and then I will hand it over. Of the two tennis players, the male tennis players, I found Patrick Zweig's Journeyman a little more convincing then the idea that the other guy, Art Donaldson, is this upper echelon player who's trying to
Mhm.
complete career Grand Slam. I believed Patrick Zweig as a journey. I didn't quite buy the other guy as a dominating tennis player. Um, actually, I'm going to stop there. We'll get to the final, the much discussed final scene
Yes.
after we make general comments. So I'm going to hand it over. My guess is that you probably liked it better than
Um, that's a very interesting and accurate comment. It's not really about tennis or even had a lot of interest in tennis. Um, and I have to tell you, watching videos of how they did the CGI for the tennis, I watched it and I don't know how they did it. It was fascinating.
it
You
was
know, they would
convincing.
have
Dennis was
they'd
convincing.
have somebody standing next to Zendaya, and Zendaya would be playing without a ball, and next to her would be a real tennis player playing with a ball, and somehow I don't know. I was fascinated without even understanding it for a second. So that's okay. It just, that's a good use of CGI. You make it look like Zendaya can play tennis. That's fine.
You can't be serious, man. You cannot be serious.
Um,
But they
yes, I
also,
do.
sorry, Steve, I just want to say they also got a lot of coaching from this guy, Billy Gilbert, I think his name is.
Uh-huh.
So the CGI combined with actual hands-on coaching, and then, they come off
Yeah,
pretty well.
yeah. You're right. I love Zendaya. You're also right that she's, I don't know, depressing. What I liked about it, at least at first, I thought I liked that she didn't mind being unlikable. That you big young actresses, they have a feeling that they're probably asked to be likable. They probably think they should be likable, and Zendaya's character in this movie is not likable. None of the tennis players are, to be honest. She's not singled out for that. Their intensity about trying to reach the top sort of precludes their being all that nice. It seemed to me. So I liked that she wasn't a cheery sort of person, and I thought it was appropriate in this movie. But when I looked back on it, you mentioned how I love her in Euphoria. Uh, she is ugly at times in Euphoria. I mean, in her performance, she's great. But I don't know why I got this idea that she was cheerful because you're not the first person to tell me. Zendaya is always the same. And what they mean is she doesn't smile over there. So that part I got to say, you're right.
What was the
I also
series she
think
was in? Do you remember? What was the series she was
um,
in?
the I really think that all three of the tennis players that it was conscious that they were likable people because of the way that the movie was trying to present them as obsessed with the success on the court. Now the problem for me then, and I've liked him in other things, but I don't want to get his name right now that I'm going to badmouth him. Josh O'Connor, who played the lesser of the players,
Patrick.
couldn't stand the guy. Every time he showed up and smirked, I just wanted to wipe him off my screen.
He was
And
smart.
so I was like, I rooted for the guy. I kept thinking of him as Riff from Press Side Story, but I kept rooting for the other guy just because I hated Josh O'Connor so much. And since I've liked him in other things, I don't know what it was about that because none of these characters were particularly likable. And yet that really threw me off. And I don't know that I can even fairly evaluate the movie because of this thing was going on with me, and I just hated that guy. So that's an honest response, but it doesn't really reflect what kind of movie it was one way or the other. Finally, I'll add that it seemed clear to me that it was Jules and Jim with tennis
Yeah,
until
yeah.
someone pointed out because of the ways in which they hinted at but never really got completely involved in the homoeroticism. It's Y tu mama tambien in tennis,
I
which is,
haven't
I
seen
think,
that, but I know
that's a better call, really.
yeah.
So anyway, uh, it can't stand up to those other movies because those are classic movies, but it's pretty good. I don't think it
What about Will?
embarrasses itself.
What about Willie and Phil? Has anybody mentioned Willie and Phil?
Willie and Phil. That I said that to a friend. I said when we were going to go see it, and I said something like, "Well, it's Jules and it's no Jules and Jim. I'm not sure. So Willie and Phil," and he didn't get it. He didn't go see that classic back in the day. Willie and Phil all time. I love that movie. Then
I'm
I
one of
probably
the
hate it
few.
now.
Okay, so you and I are probably one of the few people walking the earth that saw it in a theater when it came out.
Yeah,
Yeah,
I saw all of Mazursky's movie back then. It was one of my favorites.
yeah, Mazursky was good. Sorry to interrupt there. Go ahead.
That's okay. I was kind of done for a minute.
Yeah, Jules and Jim, for sure. The homoeroticism, uh, I don't know what to make of that. I mean, I felt like Patrick, I keep saying, I call him Patrick Zweig because I know a filmmaker with that last name that pronounces it that way. I think I was mispronouncing it as Zweig before that. Anyway, I felt like he was more open about it than the other guy who seemed,
Mhm.
it's weird. They were almost like both playing against type in a way. I don't know. I don't want to say, I'm going to end up saying the wrong thing, so I'm not going to really delve into that too deeply. I want to
Well, I
talk about,
feel like I read that the director that there was in the script it was more detailed, and then he decided to pull back on it. And the only other movie I've seen of his is the Call Me by Your Name, I think it's called,
oh,
which
he
is about a
directed
gay couple.
that. Okay,
So
there you go.
it's not that the director was like
Yeah,
shying away from it, but it's something about it in this movie he was shying away. And I maybe I'm wrong. That's not what he was trying to do anyway.
yeah, yeah. I didn't see that, but that was a very talked about film. I want to talk about the final scene, which you know, like even the Washington Post, the New York Times, they've got pieces where people analyze the final scene. Just briefly, for anybody who hasn't seen it, all culminates in this final match between the two male tennis players, one of whom is married to Zendaya, but not a great marriage, and the other one, they've rekindled their affair a year before, but she kind of secretly loves him and secretly hates him. Anyway, she arranges with him to throw the match because she doesn't want to shatter her husband's confidence. She wants the husband to go on and not retire and challenge for the Grand Slam. So they go down, of course, to the final set, the final game, and they're tied. And Patrick has agreed to throw the match. And I guess everything that's gone beforehand is him just stringing along. But the final scene, where this it's supposed to be ambiguous and et cetera, and so finally carried off, I thought it was just not only to me was it preposterous, but I thought it was just so telegraphed. I could see as the scene unfolds, and it takes forever to culminate this
Mhm.
match. I mean, I joked on the message board that I was able to complete 3 crossword puzzles in a novel in that last match of the tennis.
You could have played 10 tiebreaks in that
Yeah,
time.
I know. I thought it was just like I could almost see the thought bubbles above their head, uh, where one of them realizes he's throwing the match. And you see the thought bubble. And the other guy says, "Oh, he just figured this out." You can see the thought bubble. And then the other guy says, "I won't let him throw it, so I'll just stand here and let him serve and get the point." And then where they make eye contact and you can see the thought bubble, they remember what Zendaya said to them about tennis being conversation, and they telepathically communicate, let's give them the greatest tennis point they've ever seen. We'll play the game the way it's really supposed to be played and we'll love it. And then they have this incredible last point, and we cut, and she screams out because and you think she's angry, but no, it's very sexual for her. It's like she's climaxing. She loves it. And then they come up in the air. It was just the most preposterous. And to me, it just doesn't, it has no, I want to sound really corny here, no respect for the game. It suddenly becomes this totally,
He jumps the net in the
yeah,
middle of a point. He doesn't do it because he just won. He
no,
jumps the net during the point.
slow motion. And it struck me like, Robert Redford's last at bat in not Field of Dreams, So Natural. And it just seemed so over the top to me. And I want to contrast, to get a little more specific, the idea of him throwing the match. I want to contrast that with what I think is an underrated movie, Martin Scorsese's Color of Money, not about tennis, pool. But I'm thinking of the scene in that where, Newman beats Cruz, but then Cruz and his girlfriend show up back at the hotel room, and Newman's feeling pretty great. And Cruz lets him know in this really kind of smarmy, self-sat, he lets him know that, yeah, I dumped. And he said, you would have been so proud of me, Eddie. He gives them money, here's your cut. When you watch that scene, it's just devastating. Like, I think you experience that scene through Paul Newman, and I feel terrible. But here, it's like, okay, yeah, she arranged to have him throw it. And this guy he seems to resent it, but he doesn't seem rattled by it. I just thought it was so clunky compared to the Scorsese film. So how did you feel about the ending? Did you feel it was fitting conclusion?
First off, I was surprised. I actually didn't notice it. I thought, oh, the movie ended, went to black. Okay. And we never found out who won the match. And he jumped the net. And then I was like, oh, that was okay movie. I liked it. Okay. And then I go on YouTube and there's like 15 YouTube videos explaining the ending. I watched one because I thought, oh, what ending? I must have missed something. And they were just talking about what you just described. And I thought, well, that's it. That's not that much to talk about, really. It was just a choice, and I didn't care. And I mean, I guess I cared who won the match, and it wasn't totally distant from it. But as you say, the tennis was less important than the relationships, and so because of that, who won the match wasn't as important to me as it might have been in something else, like Color of Money or other ones.
I should say I didn't even care. It wasn't even that I cared about who won the match. It was just the way the scene was done that bothered me more than that. I didn't really care.
Mm-hmm.
It's probably best that they left it.
One thing I wondered, because we've watched 4 tennis movies. Back when we did baseball, what did we do? Like 7 videos or something? We had a lot of baseball movies. We could have done horse racing, watched 7 of those. Boxing, we could have watched 27.
Yeah.
In the end, tennis isn't a big topic, seems to me. I may be just missing.
Okay.
And sports movies in general, whether they're good or bad, you can usually get a good ending by like the big bout or the big race or whatever happens. That's thrilling and was certainly true in the Challengers. So sports has that advantage. You can no matter what happens, Rocky's going to be good in the last 10 minutes or whatever. So my only question really is, why is tennis, excuse me, less amenable to a movie script than some of these other sports?
Well, okay, I'm going to mention some more tennis movies. I made a supplemental list.
Sure, do it.
It is kind of interesting that all 4 films we talked about tonight did culminate in not interesting. I mean, it's the way it has to be, right? They all culminate in the big match. The King Riggs film's a little bit different, and that's not a tournament; that's a staged event. Other tennis films. But first of all, one of them I'm going to mention. One shot I liked in Challengers, partly because it shows the director has a knowledge of film history, is where the match is unfolding and she's staring straight ahead and everybody around her is going like that. Right. You think of Strangers on a Train.
Strangers on the Train, yep.
And I thought, was that a sly joke? Are we supposed to think, well, maybe she's a little psychotic? It showed a nice respect for film history. So I thought of Strangers on a Train, of course. Woody Allen's done one big tennis film, which I think is probably the last Woody Allen film I saw, Match Point, which I didn't really think much of at the time. There's a tennis scene in Annie Paul. I'm pretty sure they play tennis at the beginning of that. The Squid and the Whale tennis is kind of important because Jeff Daniels really resents the coach who's having an affair with Laura Linney. He's so competitive. He plays with his son and they get angry, or maybe that's ping pong, but there's tennis scenes in that. The Stepford Wives, one of the ways one of the Stepford Wives has crossed over to the dark side is she gave up the tennis court. She loves playing tennis, but she gave up the tennis court. But then Catherine Ross shows up and she's out playing tennis, and you know that she's been turned into a Stepford wife. And the one that I haven't seen, you probably have, Wimbledon. Did you see that film?
Oh, the one with Kirsten Dunst?
Yeah, Kirsten Dunst. You haven't
Yeah,
seen
no, I
it?
haven't seen it.
Neither have I. Okay.
So there you go. There's plenty of them out there.
Yeah. But yeah, you would think there'd be more. Boxing and baseball seem to be the sport of choice. Maybe football and basketball, not as many, especially not basketball.
Some of my friends mentioned Royal Tenenbaums. I
Yes,
never think of
of course,
it.
Royal Tenenbaums. One of the Wilsons plays a
I can't
guy,
remember. Yeah, I can't remember the tennis
he's a
scene there.
tour player, and he
And
has
while
a
we were
belt now.
talking, I thought of Blow Up,
Oh,
Antonioni film,
of
where they
course,
play the mime tennis match
the famous
at one
ending of
point.
Blow Up. I know, I know. Wow.
I just thought of it just now.
I love that ending. I mean, Blow Up kind of makes me laugh as a film. There's stuff I agree with Kale. Like, why is this supposed, why why don't they admit this would have been a really groovy time to to be involved in all this? Again, why is everybody so grim? The ending just cracks me up. I should post that in my tennis group's Facebook page. Yeah, that's a good mention there.
Oh, I
Anyway,
thought of
so
one more. This is in another Hitchcock. Dial
oh
M for Murder. Ray Milland's a tennis player.
yes, we don't see
He's a
tennis, but
pro,
he's a
tennis
tennis
pro.
player.
Yeah, I don't think
Right.
we ever see him play. It's a
You're
stage
right.
play, so I
Yep.
don't doubt they would have had a tennis court on the stage.
Yeah. Somebody should, I think, a tennis film I would love to see would be about Jimmy Connors and Chris Everett, because that was such a thing in 74
Yeah.
and 75, I mean, try to imagine these two up and coming players become romantically involved, and they were such a contrast. Before McEnroe, Connors was like real temperamental, kind of surly guy, and she was this like sweetheart type teenager out of the 50s. And
Ice Queen in her
I,
play.
yeah, that would make a
Yeah.
great film. um, Hopefully we'll get that at some point.
When you got Agassi and Steffi, that would be another one you could do.
Agassi, when Steffi Graf, yeah, Agassi on there's all sorts of, well, oh, we forgot King Richard, of course, which I haven't seen.
Well, I have.
Okay, which led
I
to,
forgot it on purpose.
yeah, which of course led to one of the great Academy Award
Yeah.
moments. Um, we're demanding more tennis films, I guess. One really great tennis film. There hasn't been a great tennis film, I don't think. I'm back playing, I should mention. It's definitely replaced golf as my favorite participatory sport, although I'm having issues with my legs and hip. I play doubles and that's less strenuous, but
Mhm.
I am loving it. I find it's a much more satisfying game than golf. Golf, I've just accepted. It's too complicated, too difficult. I was never getting any better. I feel more confident playing tennis, and it's kind of a highlight of my week right now. The 2 times I play tennis, and sometimes 3 times a week. Um,
I can remember one because it only happened once. I played on clay,
I
and
played on clay last week.
I was amazed at how different it was to be able to slide, you
It
know,
was very
because
different.
when I watch it, and oh yeah, they have different surfaces, and I don't think anything, except that clearly that the cement ones are like hard. But just played once on clay, and I never forgot it because it's different. Not the way the ball goes, but the way you go as you slide around on the dirt.
Very much so. One of the players at my club, she is over in Stratford, and she said, "Well, look, and I'm thinking of joining Stratford along with St. Mary's next year." And she arranged for us to play with two people she knew, and they have clay courts, and much better for me physically. You don't have that hard pounding. Um,
Mhm.
and yeah, it didn't change the game appreciably. I played better than I usually do, so maybe it was a help to even my playing. I don't know, but it was an enjoyable experience. Um, I'll continue to play in St. Mary's, but in terms of my health, I think I'm more suited to playing on clay. Anyway, thanks again, Stephen. Enjoyed this. I will hand it over to
Hey,
Scott Woods, our director and technical guru, and we will we'll get it up in time for if they. That's what I mean. I got to pay more attention. If they play Wimbledon this year or the U.S. Open, I don't watch enough tennis.
I think US Open is next, but I could be wrong.
Okay,
French is done.
and I will finish with the very.
There's people dropping out. That seems to be the news right now. Is who isn't playing in the next major?
I'm going to finish with something very negative. A photo I saw posted the other day of Serena with Donald Trump. I think a very recent photo. I mean, disappointing, you know. I mean, athletes are free to do what they want. Um, I just don't know why she, you know. Anyway, oh, I'm getting echo now. So I will say goodbye, Stephen, and thanks again.
Okay, thanks for the invite.
Yep.
Look forward to the video.